guys, I've got a really cool product to put on the FJR today. I've got the HealTech Quickshifter. Let's take a look. Now, if you're new to Quickshifters, it is simply a really cool, fun toy. It's not needed whatsoever, but frankly, most people that once you have one or once you try one a couple times, you really want it. I've got one on the FZ09, had it on there for a while. I love them. I've ridden them on other bikes for years, always been jealous of them. You know what? Time to put one on the FJR. It is simply an electronic way to shift the bike without the clutch. And it's very fast and very safe. There's a lot of myths out there about them. Some people think they're dangerous for the transmission. Couldn't be further from the truth. They're actually safer than shifting yourself. The premise behind them is that for momentarily, fractions of a second, the engine, usually ignition, but sometimes the fuel on the older type systems, is shut off. As soon as you start to move the shift lever with your foot, the computer will turn off ignition, which completely turns off torque to the transmission, and the gear goes right into place. Much, much, much faster than anybody pulling in the clutch, shifting, letting the clutch back out. There is none of that human delay factor. It is simply touching the shifter, engine is cut, gear immediately goes in, engine immediately comes back on. You can't even tell. There's no blip, there's no delay, there's no jerkiness or anything like that. It's very seamless. It's just that fun and easy. So yes, it is just for fun. That's all it's for. You don't need it, but believe me, you're probably going to want it. So there are a bunch of systems out on the market. This one is, yes, one of the most expensive, but one of the very best, and I'll show you here why. So this is the actual Quickshifter itself. It's just a load sensor. This is it, right here. And these will install to different parts of the bike depending on what bike it is. In my case, this just goes on the bolt that secures the shift rod to the transmission. That's it. And it just detects pressure when you start to move the peg with your foot. It detects pressure and initiates the whole procedure. That's it. Sometimes, like here on my FZ09, the sensor is a replacement shift rod itself. This is the sensor in this case, and it's basically the same thing. It's just in the middle of here, and it's detecting pressure. So when you touch this, it's detecting pressure this way, and it starts the whole procedure. But in the FJR, they do have other units that replace the shift rod exactly the same way, but in this case, the sensor goes right here on this little bolt. So it keeps this whole mechanism, and when you touch the shifter, it actually detects pressure right here at this bolt. Really simple. Doesn't matter where in the system it goes. Some of them will mount down here, some up on here, some of the rod, some down here. Doesn't matter. As long as it's in this system and it can detect pressure, it works. Simple as that. Now in the case of the FJR, it has no factory programming for this. Other bikes, like my FZ09, the stock computer has the functionality built in, so I just had to buy the part and plug it in. It was made to do it from the factory. Like I said, this is completely safe. There's no problem. A lot of bikes come with it from the factory. Some bikes, like the FZ09, it's an optional part. Other bikes, like the FJR, while it was never an option from the factory, you can add it in. No problemo. It's just adding a couple more parts rather than just plugging in the sensor, because this requires a control box. Since the stock ECU doesn't have the functionality, you have to add it yourself. Now, this is one of the better units and more expensive units because it's fully programmable. You can tune it to be perfectly smooth on any bike. So it gives you the parameters to make that happen. So it's not just a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. It's also Bluetooth enabled, so I'll be able to control it here from my smartphone and dial it in perfectly. And if you want to change any of the parameters, it's just flipping some switches. Super easy. You never have to get back into the system. There's no dip switches or anything like that. So it's really cool. But here's what makes this super better than any other solution. The other half of the equation. No splicing. This is the way to do electronics. This is the way to do any kind of add-in device. I'm okay with splicing into brake lights to make them flash, or turn signals to make them auto cancel. Those kinds of things aren't super critical. I am not going to be splicing into my ignition system. I'm not going to be splicing into my main wiring harness. Just no interest in doing it. It's a little bit of a risk. It's a very critical system. Zero worry with this kit because they do it right. They give you a custom harness. You order it according to what your bike is, and it comes with all the plug-in connectors. These go to your stock factory connectors, and this system simply goes in between where your stock connections are. No splicing, nothing permanent. The whole thing goes click, 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 done. If you ever want to take it off, click, 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 back to stock. 100% perfect. So it's worth the extra 50 bucks or so to get this system where you have the custom wiring loom option. And by the way, you may have very easy options available depending on your bike. If you have, for example, a power commander, some models and some bikes, you can get an add-on Quickshifter module that plugs right in because you already have your power commander wired into your bike, and it's simply an add-on option. So if you have one that fits that application, that's an option for you. So inside the main package, we'll give you a little cool key ring there. The control module itself and sensor, they just plug together. Some zip ties for routing the wires. A replacement bolt that will actually mount the sensor to the shift rod. A couple spacers there. Stickers and a setup guide for actually programming it. And a couple pages here of the install. So they give you lots of different mounting options, and they tell you why or why you wouldn't. Oh, I noticed some rust here on that bolt. I meant to replace that with a better fastener. It's one I got from Home Depot. I forgot to order another one. I'll have to do that. Probably a top one there. Yep, top one needs it too. Anyway, they give you some options on why you would or would not want to mount it in different positions. Now, if you mount it here on the shift rod, if your bike has sufficient clearance, it will be limited to upshifts only, which is all I'm after. I'm not interested in using it for downshifts because this will not make the bike auto blip, which in my opinion is really critical for any kind of quick shifter doing downshifts. I'm not really wanting to risk the transmission being that clunky. This FJR transmission is not butter smooth. If it were a different bike, I would consider it, but I digress. Even if I run this rod all the way down, I've got a few threads left here at the bottom of just normal adjustment throw. Even if I ran it all the way down, I still have to mount this in 2 washers, and there wouldn't quite be enough clearance. So I'm definitely going to mount it up here. Note, if you do mount it up here, you do have the option of using this system for up and down shifting. That's your choice. It'll definitely work 100% up shifting. Like I said, downshifting, that's kind of at your own risk. Here's the most critical part of this whole install is getting the torque on this mounting bolt correct. Number one, it doesn't matter which side the sensor goes on, so it can be flipped either way, it's the same. You run the bolt through and these washers go on either side of the sensor. They are beveled and they should point out. They show the little description in the instructions. They're creating a little bit of a spring force. There's already Loctite applied here to the bolt, so we just need to run it in and snug it up. This needs to be torqued to 5 Newton meters, which is just under 4 foot-pounds, or about 30 inch-pounds. If you're not confident about doing it by hand to the correct amount, you need to use a small torque wrench to do it. So now we're just going to align this in here, and I'm going to align it so that the wire is just facing in out of the way, and run it in. And there we go. Got plenty of room here for the wire. It's not going to hit anything on the up or down shifts. And now we can go ahead and mount the unit and get the wiring harness plugged in, and we'll route this in and clean it up. They do note that after the first few rides, you're going to want to re-snug up that bolt and possibly update your settings. There's a sensitivity setting basically for the sensor after the first few rides. So in the harness package, we just have the harness itself, all one piece, some zip ties, a jumper, and the instructions. So let's figure out exactly where we need to mount everything. Pretty simple. We need to get access under the tank here so we can get to the ignition coils. Check out my throttle body sync video. I'll put up a little pop-up there. If you need all the details on how to get to this point, it's real simple. And we need to find a mounting place, and we need it away from heat, weather, vibration, and the stock ECU. The stock ECU is under here. This little pocket right in here looks real good. Just pull up the height adjuster bracket here, and now we've got plenty of room to actually mount the unit right there. It comes with Velcro mounting, and that's very important. You cannot mount it rigidly. It needs to kind of float to be isolated. So I'm going to clean this off, and that's where that will stick. We can route the wire just right up here neatly under the throttle bodies and come right up here. Plenty of slack. So besides plugging into these, all we need to do is find a ground point, a ground bolt somewhere, not on the engine, and they suggest not directly to the battery for the unit. And that's it. So to pop off the ignition connectors, it's real simple. Just push down on the end here, it'll rock, give it a little wiggle, slides off, and then all we have to do is plug in one set of connectors to each end here. Can't mess them up. They only go on one way. Doesn't matter which goes where. They only note that if you have a 1 or 3 cylinder bike, just make sure that the red is connected. That's the primary, but we've got a 4, so all 4 are used. Doesn't make any difference. So I'm using this guy up here for a ground. I verified with my meter that it is a good ground point. Easy enough to get out, but I'll tell you, a complete pain in the ass to put back in unless you have one of these little ratcheting wrenches. Easy peasy going in with this, but I don't have small enough fingers to get that started without it, and it's virtually impossible to get a wrench in there, and you can't get a socket in there, but this zips it in, no problemo. So now we just have to clean up our wiring and mount the box and plug it in. Alright, got everything routed here. Got the ground cable just loose enough where it doesn't interfere with getting the heat shield in or out or the T-bar. You don't have to do anything about tying up the connector ends. Those are short leads. They sit exactly where the stock wires lay on the top. And then I've got the 2 wires lightly zip tied just together up here and down to the base of the fuel tank sender wires underneath where they will pass through the shield here, and then just routed it down out of the way, staying away from the cylinder head and coming out the side nice and neat. So now we'll just button this back up. So here's how I routed things, making sure to leave a good amount of slack in here so it can actually actuate. I routed it behind the frame. I just popped the panel off here. I got one zip tie here just loose around the main harness, and cable runs straight up here, comes out a little slot here, and just runs underneath the seat pan bracket. The main wire, I've got one zip tie holding it here, and again it'll loop in, and we've got everything plugged in. Now we can just fire the bike up, make sure it still runs correctly and we don't have anything screwed up with our ignition connectors, and then I'll go ahead and tidy these wires up. Be sure that you put this back in the same position that it was in. You know, there's a high and a low position for adjusting your seat, and if you're confused, look for a dirt mark. You'll see it was in one position or the other. And they're marked here, and I've also got a video if you're confused on flipping it. If you didn't know the seat flips between a high and a low, this is half of the equation, and flipping this bracket around is the other, to raise it or lower it an inch. I've got mine in the low position. You need to look for the green light, which means we're good. That wraps up the hardware. Now let's figure out the software. So the software setup was super easy. They have an app both for iPhone and Android devices. Just search for HealTech, and it has a setup guide. It runs you through about a dozen different screens. It's just pressing next, verifying information. All the defaults worked fine for this bike, setting 4 cylinders. The only thing I had to adjust was the maximum RPM. You have to tell it what the red line of the bike is. And it starts off with very safe settings. So I'm expecting when I go for this first test ride that it might have a bit of a hesitation or delay, because they do start with big, safe numbers for the engine cutoff. And it's trial and error, getting that a little tighter to get you the real snick, really seamless shifts. And if you detect a problem, you know you went one too far, and you just back it off. So that's pretty much it. And do note that after the first few rides, go and retorque that sensor nut, and then you should be good to go. So I'm off for the first ride here. We'll give it a test and see what it's like. I'm sure I'll have to do a little bit of fine-tuning.
Seriously? Right as I'm going out, it starts pouring. You gotta be kidding me. Okay, plan B, gotta wait. Oh, it should be a rainbow at least somewhere. It's still sun shining out. Okay, let's try that again. It's starting to let up and it looks clear enough. The bike will get dirty, but it needs a bath anyway. I actually have to clay bar this thing. We've got pollen season, and man, I got a sticky film over the top and front of the bike just from riding around. It's just leaving a sticky haze over everything. Gotta do it a couple times a year around here. I don't know what plants do it, but something, because both bikes have it. So one other thing I noticed is the app appears to have been updated after the instructions are written, because it has an auto adaptive mode and it's defaulting to that. So you still have the manual control if you want to adjust the settings. I think I need a new battery in my closer there. Let's try the backup. So you still have the manual controls if you want them or need them, but it should self-adjust after several shifts. Let's give it a shot. It's also a good test of the waterproofness of my new mic. So the other important setting that it has is the minimum speed, where it will not work under a certain RPM, and that's so you don't accidentally activate it shifting into first when you're slipping the clutch. Defaults to 3,000. So I'm just gonna watch my RPMs and make sure that's okay, which it should be. I'm not shifting below 3,000. Alright, so here's the first test. Definitely a jerk, but like I said, it should auto adjust. Oh yeah, that second one was seamless. I saw my traction control light come on just ever so slightly there. Nice signal for the first shift. Go down this other street here, get away from any traffic. But man, that second one, that that was even more seamless than the FZ09. Looks like I need some gas. Really slick out with this fresh rain. Hasn't rained in a long time. And the tires are cold. Alright, let's try another tester. I'm just doing very little throttle. This is like 15-20%. Oh, like butter. There is a bit of a lurch. I'm going to see if that auto adjusts. But the actual transmission, seamless. It's just like the best BMW I've ridden. It feels just like a video game. Let's get on to the other road here and try some higher RPM shifts. Now, like I said, I'm not using this for downshifting. It does say that in the higher gears, they recommend 4th and above. At higher RPMs, it's okay to use. But like I said, there's no auto blip, so I don't care about the downshift that much to risk the transmission. Oh, that's awesome. So I just saw the little flicker of the neutral light, just momentarily. I mean, you can't even read the N. Wow, I can't believe how smooth that is for an aftermarket device. I mean, literally no built-in program to the ECU, but this feels exactly like any factory option quickshifter I've ever ridden. A good one from like BMW and Ducati. There's first to second, absolutely seamless. Love it. So if you are in the market for a quickshifter, and like I said, this is good for almost any bike out there. Dirt bike, street bike, sport bike, it doesn't matter. If it's got a shifter, you can install this unit. And they have harnesses for just about every bike out there. So no splicing. Awesome sauce. The other really cool thing is now I don't have to worry about the muscle memory switching between bikes now that they both have it. Oh, this is so cool. Definitely worth it. I kid you not. It's just so fun. Let's go back down into first. Let's do a try a wide open. It just works. I mean, plain and simple. That is fantastic. Love it. To me, worth every penny. So there you go. Hope this helps somebody if you're on the fence about it. I definitely recommend it. If you're thinking about installing it, that's all you have to do. It is really simple. Taking your time. I mean, if you've got a bike like this where things are fairly accessible, I would budget about an hour and a half from start to finish, from opening the package to here being on the road. Of course, it took me longer just doing the video and taking my time in the garage, but now that you've seen the video and you've got the instructions, easy peasy, man. Other bikes, of course, that'll depend on how much you have to disassemble, but wow, very impressed, guys. HealTech, you did an awesome job with this unit. Can't believe that in just one shift it got butter smooth. Great job. All right, so that's it, guys. Stay tuned, got lots of more stuff coming up. I've got a bunch of KTM videos coming up, test reviews, so I'm looking forward to doing that and getting the videos out to you. After that, man, busy season starts. I'm going to spend 2 days over in Daytona, and then we've got Leesburg, and I've got trips, lots of stuff coming up. Stay tuned. See you next time.